Alright, so everybody can hear me fine? Alright, beautiful. So look, let's get started. I don't know if we'll take the whole hour. If it's just me, I know that I can talk forever. So it'll be up to you guys to stop me now and then with questions, or else it's gonna be, you know, a little too one way. So yeah, the title of the chat was the difference between story host and game master or dungeon master. I use those terms interchangeably, and there's two ways to approach a subject. I could just start and just throw all the theory at you, and I just say to you the definition of what I believe a story host is, and start making comparisons with the dungeon master. I'm gonna start in a different way, which is sort of like the way I approach it in my book, and it's a little bit of a different experience. I want to give you some background. I want to tell you exactly where I'm coming from. As you may have noticed by my accent, I am not a native English speaker. English is the second language for me, and once upon a time, in fact most of my life, I lived in Mexico until I finished college. And the role-playing game scene in Mexico is very different, I imagine, from what it was over here in the United States. I believe it was somewhere around the 90s where Vampire the Masquerade sort of started this new wave of making story games and sort of move away from the mechanistic interpretation. Mexico was many years behind, right? So only the most popular games ever made it to Mexico, and in fact only Dungeons and Dragons made it to Mexico. Nevertheless, at the time I was growing up and I had Dungeons and Dragons to go with, it was the thing to play for people like me, and I embraced it. There was nothing else. I liked it. I learned what I could, and then I started trying to make my own thing. And here's where it gets funny, because I sort of did my own thing in a vacuum. I really, outside of Dungeons and Dragons, I had nothing else to compare with. So I am completely removed from all the rich culture that was developing here in the United States, and I was sort of like a test tube experiment that you just put it far away in some place just to see if it comes up with ideas. So if you ever seen how Darwin found weird birds in the Galapagos, because Galapagos is very remote and evolution took a different path there, that's sort of what happened with me, and part of it is my fault. I'm not the most social guy ever, but I sort of developed my own thing just due to isolation. And then eventually I came here to this country and I just found out that actually I had reinvented the wheel. I had done enough wheels to just open a railroad car. So that is my background. That said, I want to talk about the sort of archetype that most of the game masters have. Probably you are familiar, or maybe you have heard the phrase forever DM, right? Usually our hobby is played in groups. Usually there is a tight group of friends, you know, 6 to a dozen. Dozen is too much. It's usually like 6, and there is always one guy in the group, and he is the go-to guy. Whenever there is a new game, they go to Charlie, if that's his name, and say, "Hey Charlie, you know, we want to play this new game." And it's sort of understood that they're all going to be players, and Charlie is the guy who's going to run it, right? And why? Because Charlie always runs it. He is forever DM. And what are the attributes that people who are forever DMs have? I listed a few in the book. By the way, I'm cheating. Here is the book where I'm basing most of my stuff from. So what I wrote here, right? So someone who is in that archetype usually is obviously a creative person. Obviously we like stories. We also like making people happy. We like making our friends happy in particular. We have usually few but very close friends. We also like to lead, sometimes in a very overt way, leading from the front, sometimes from the back. We are the kind of person that if we see there is a baton to be picked up, we pick it up because no one else is doing it, and then we lead with it, right? Usually we're good learners. Usually we have a head for systems and order, some sense of discipline, right? Strong grasp of what fairness means, good common sense, right? Does that sound familiar? Those are the attributes that you typically look for in someone who wants to be a DM or a group DM. So again, you are saddled with a new game, and you are the only one who reads everything in the manual. That's the DM manual of this new game. and then what is what you learn. Most games, that's arguable, I believe most games, at least of the classical era, remember Dungeons and Dragons, are sort of designed in a way that is antagonistic. It sort of makes it like a versus sort of situation. Is you are the dungeon master, right? You control the dungeon, and the players are sort of against you. And this is a weird spot to be put in, right? So look, we all know that any story, I mean any screenwriter will tell you, if it doesn't have conflict, it's not a good story, right? So conflict has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is you in that sort of game. And that conflict, for it to be meaningful, it has to put your players, your friends, in actual danger. And this is like walking a tightrope kind of thing. On one hand, they chose you because they all want to have a good time, and you want them to have a good time. You want it to be a meaningful experience. You want everyone to be happy. On the other hand, the game is pitting you against them in such a way that if they are doing well all the time and they're just easily coasting through all the challenges, then you're doing a lousy job at challenging them. Or if they are struggling all the time, and if you are just in inches of killing them all the time, some players like that, others will say that you're being too hard on them. But it comes down to you. You are the one who is responsible in this antagonistic game for a story that is meaningful and rich and interesting and fun. And if it's not any of those things, it's your fault, right? So I have a quote here from a friend, right, that says, an antagonistic type of game is like walking a tightrope on stage while carrying in each hand a bucket of small monkeys who enjoy pelting you in the face with handfuls of assorted dice, right? And a bad roll, right, just makes the monkey fall, and he splatters on the ground, and then it's not fun anymore. And if and they're constantly just hitting you in the face, right? And if they are not the kind of player who sort of rolls with it, sometimes they can make decisions that make them deserve to fall off the tightrope and splatter themselves on the pavement, right? So it puts you in a difficult situation. And what I observed is that when you bring up that subject, there is tons of advice, and in the culture where we live in, there is tons of advice that tells you that that's just the way it is, and you just have to heroically cope with it. Sort of like a Charge of the Light Brigade sort of situation, when you know it's a doomed quest, but you have to power through it, right? So you hear advice such as, you know, a good GM knows how to give the exact balance between, what did I write here? Healthy challenge and soul-crushing slaughter, right? You want to be like in the twilight between heroic struggle and Kafkian helplessness, right? And you have to own the story. So the advice is acknowledging the fact that you are in a tough spot between pleasing your friends and killing their characters, and nobody questions why that is. They just tell you how to cope with it. They just tell you how to deal with it. They tell you that the good DMs or the good GMs are the ones who deal with it really well, but nobody questions it, like, why does it have to be that in the first place, right? And what does it mean when you are in this antagonistic role? Basically what it means is that you have to control the story, right? Because if the story is boring, it's your fault. If the story is too easy, it's your fault. If the story is too harsh on them and they're all suffering, everything is your fault. That makes you the owner, that makes you have responsibility. And I'm sure you heard from Spider-Man plenty of times that great power and so forth. Turns out that great power doesn't, is the other way around. Great responsibility doesn't actually give you great power. It just makes you need it. Right? It demands that you have that power. If you're responsible of the story, you need to control it. So over time, right, what I have observed here, I put here decades of classical RPG game design, tools of control have been invented so that you can own this story and walk this very tightrope balance, right? So these two tools of control that are helping you fight certain forces against them, and they sort of match each other. First, let's realize what you're fighting against, right? I call it in the book, there's two gods that I refer to in the book. There is the gods of randomness, right? And then there is the gods of ego. So the god of randomness is the god that will wait until you are in an epic moment in your story, when you have the utmost hero, you know, about to commit something amazing, and he rolls a 1. That is the god of randomness taking control of the story away from you. And the god of ego is the hero who wants to roll a 20 every single time, because he is the hero and he launches himself on impossible stuff, and you have to find creative ways not to kill him, right? Because he clearly has a death wish. Constantly you're fighting against those two kinds of gods. How do you control this story? Because remember, the story is your responsibility. Two things were invented. One is what I call the fudge, and the other one is the railroad, right? So the fudge is the GM screen, right? So you have your GM screen, and if you're in a tough spot, you roll some dice behind that nobody can see, and everybody, I think everybody knows that you're not really reading those dice. I think everybody knows that you're really gonna do whatever the hell you want anyway, but you're giving the pretense that you're consulting the gods of randomness. That GM screen is like the perfect tool for corruption, frankly, right? You can do whatever you want, but it's a tool of control. You need it. If you don't have that GM screen, you're at the mercy of the gods of randomness. It's a tool of control. What is the second one? The railroad, right? So railroad is when you plan or sometimes buy a pre-planned story, right? So somebody already made it for you. There is a professional cat herder who already consider all the variables and all the probabilities and prepare for them, and sort of created for you a Disneyland theme ride, right? I don't know if you saw in the news recently that they banned the selfie sticks in Disneyland, right? And this has to do with it. They said, so in Disneyland, if you talk to one of those Imagineers, great title by the way, they'll tell you there is a sphere of safety that is designed around the ride, right? So if you are sitting as you are supposed to in your chair and you just stick out your arms, they have calculated no human being could stick his arm out far enough to hit himself. And that's how the ride is made. And there are very narrow tolerances there. You go to Space Mountain, every 5 seconds it feels that you're about to get decapitated, but you will never get decapitated. You can't. It's planned that way. The selfie stick changes that. That's why they banned it. And that is the same concept with the prepackaged campaigns and the prepackaged adventures, right? A professional has made them, and they give you the guarantee. They say, look, GM, I know that you're dealing with a herd of cats and that the gods of ego want to take them wherever you want, but if you can just channel them down this safe path I have engineered for you, then I guarantee you, you will reach Act 2 and eventually Act 3, and here is a set of 6 possible endings that you can have, and you know, it's all pre-planned, it's gonna be fine, you go boy, right? Tools, fudge, railroad. And sometimes we praise them, we say, oh, invisible railroad, as if that was a good thing, you know? As invisible railroad, oh, for a moment, I thought I had freedom of choice. What a nice feeling, right? Of course, I never really had it, but for a moment I thought I did. That is so awesome. What a nice invisible road. No, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, let me break out the Scrabble words, high-scoring Scrabble words. I wrote here. In summary, several decades of classical tabletop RPG paradigms had forced us GM types into antagonistic, omnipotent roles that thrive only on the narrow twilight between good narrative and choice, which, as we will soon see, is a false dichotomy. And remember, we started with the DM persons, right? The ones who wants to please everybody and who like fairness, and our friends wants us to make a story for them. That's where they put us. And because we are put in that situation, they give us controls, and those tools of control change the story. So what I'm saying here feels a little bit, it's sort of against the grain of what is the accepted knowledge and accepted advice that most people will give you. Most people will say, look, it is a heroic and noble thing to be a good GM, and you can find the right balance. I don't disagree with all that. I'll just tell you where I come from, right? So again, like I said, I was in Mexico. I was running my own game, because that's another story. and all my best friends were there. It's usually a group of like 6 friends. One friend had this character, he loved it, he made drawings of that character in every page of his notebook, constantly talking about the guy. He's one of those paladin types that does good because goodness sake and always has to confront evil and whatever. So I had this evil character that this good player character had to go fight, and so Gods of Ego, right, pointing the guy in a direction where he's gonna get killed, and Gods of Randomness just totally slaughter the guy, right? He keeps rolling ones, I keep rolling 20s. Eventually it comes to a point where he's gonna die, and he's gonna be one of those very heroic deaths, and it's just one of those moments that get immortalized in poems and so forth. He goes forward, rolls a 1, my response, here's your 20, he dies, right? And it's huge moment around the table, everyone, it feels like a real person died. They said to me after the fact that I had done something fair, like nobody complained, like I did the right thing, it was all fair, etc. I felt bad. I felt like I personally had killed his guy, which of course is preposterous. I would never, I didn't kill, the necromancer killed him and the dice, but it was my story. And if my best friend, which really is, I mean, like someone who means a lot to me, is gonna be depressed now for a week, it was somehow my fault. And I was asking myself, I had my tools of control, I had my GM screen, I could have fudged the dice, or I could have railroaded something. I could have said, you know, there is a voice from the sky and your God says your righteous deeds and there is an earthquake. A million things I could have done, I didn't do them, he died. Why? Could I have saved him? The question that I have here, couldn't I, sitting at the table here in Earth, have reached somehow, right, with my greasy little hand, across Plato's cave, read that, Google that later, into the feral fantasy world of Baxia, which is where we were, and saved this brave person I had come to admire and whom I supposedly care so much about and was my best friend? Could I have saved him? No. No, I could not. Why? So I had to meditate and be introspective. Was it about fairness? Was it about justice? No. Justice and fairness was the side effect. And it took me a while to find out why I didn't save this guy. Turns out the reason is authenticity. And that's the best word I can find in the English language. Remember, it's not my first language. Authenticity. After you have met with your same group of people and you have advanced a story for a number of months and the world feels real and the characters feel real and everybody there is invested in it, and suddenly there is a voice in the sky and the earthquake shakes and everyone around the table sort of looks at each other and they roll their eyes and they go, yeah, the GM saved him. You lose the authenticity in that moment and you'll never get it back. And remember when I said that about the GM screen, that everybody knows you're fudging the dice behind it? Everybody knows it. And they'll see you do that and they'll say, oh, the necromancer suddenly trips on the dice of his tennis shoes and, you know, now you decapitate him. That they'll know that was a fudge and the story will never feel the same way again. I bet it's happened to you. I bet if you have been in enough games, I bet you can think of an instance when the GM made one of those gut-wrenching decisions and basically he was faced between upholding fun versus upholding authenticity. And probably he said to himself, well, it's just a game, you know? Nobody's gonna die in real life. We're all just here eating Cheetos on the table. I mean, it's fun. Let's just go for the fun side. And they did. And suddenly, everything changes. Maybe they will not say it, but the world feels a little less magical. And things feel a little less real. And it's like it's plasticky now. I mean, or maybe it's just me. Let me tell you a story. When I was in elementary and they gave us all a book to read, by chance I picked a book which is called The Never-Ending Story by this guy Michael Ende, a German author. It was in English, of course. I read it. Read the best I could. It's nothing like the movie. If you have seen the movie, you have seen nothing. Read the book. So, see, I mean, and I like, this is coming from someone who liked the movie. The book is like, the movie is like the first third. And in that never-ending story, right, the premise is that there is this magical world called Fantasia, right? It's just a magical place, and somehow all of the dreams and imaginations and just whatever we think in our heads, somehow it becomes real there, right? So there is fairies there, and there is vampires and gnomes and dwarves and elves, and everything we have imagined somehow is real. Fantasia is infinite, and we're trying to save it. Wonderful story, right? There is one scene in particular that stayed with me, and it's just an amazing scene, and the movie doesn't do it justice. So we know that there is the hero of the story. It's called Atreyu, right? And Atreyu eventually will learn that he was just running adventures just to make us interested, and he breaks the fourth wall, etc. So Atreyu has been running a long series of adventures. He is being chased by an agent of the evil forces, right, which is a wolf, and they call it Gmork, right, Gmork. So Gmork has been chasing Atreyu for a long time. Eventually he loses track of him. Gmork keeps the chase. Gmork lands into the land of the nightmares, right? So it's a horrible place where vampires and skeletons and spooky ghosts live, right? And the nothing is consuming that land. If you remember the movie or the book, the nothing is just an emptiness that is just devouring all of Fantasia, and is visually represented as like a giant storm. And out of this darkness, right, nothing comes out anymore. And the nothingness is devouring the land of the nightmares, and all of the nightmares are having one last party. Just imagine that scene. And Gaia is the princess of darkness in that land, right? And they're all having just one last festival. They're eating and drinking, and they're dancing like crazy, and then they're jumping into the nothing, and they never come back. And this storm is just eating everything. And Gmork is there. Gmork arrives asking about Atreyu. The princess knows that he's an agent of evil, so she chains him to a wall with chains that he cannot break out of, etc. So he's just chained there, waiting for the nothing to get him. And that's where Atreyu comes along. And then, and Gmork doesn't know that Atreyu is Atreyu. He doesn't know that the guy that just arrived is the one he was looking for. And they have a conversation, right? This chained werewolf figure with the hero of the story in the storm that is consuming their world, and the wolf explains to Atreyu how the system works, right, with capital S and with capital W, how the system works. So the nothing is when a being from Fantasia, which remember is a dream or an illusion or something, is eaten by the nothing, but then is transformed and then is sent into our world slightly changed. And the change is that now he is called a lie. A lie. So a lie is something that will make you buy what you don't need. It will make you hate what you don't know. It will make you fear that which could save us. It still carries a little bit of the kernel of truth that made a Fantastican when he was alive and sane, but it's now been twisted. And think about it. I mean, when I read that part, and then I just thought of the news and the newspapers and everything we see on TV and the advertisements and everything our world revolves on. Wars. I mean, I don't want to get too epic here and too dramatical, but think about it. Every single large enterprise that humanity undertakes has at its corner a story. There is just a grain of story in everything. Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, right? So let's go get Iraq, right? People kill each other over lies. And what is a lie? And here's the thing, a lie, the fundamental difference between a lie and the truth is the truth doesn't care what you think about it, right? The truth is the truth. If you believe it, good for you. If you don't believe it, it gives zero nothing, right? It doesn't care. So you might think to yourself, look, if I fudge the dice a little bit, I'm not making a lie, I'm not making money out of this, they're not paying me, right? It's like, what's the big deal if you know, if I make a lie? Here's the thing, it's not just money. It's not just money. You could make a lie just because you value fun more than you value authenticity. And when you make a lie, then you get that feeling I described 5 minutes ago around the table when everyone goes, you know, the story feels a little more Disney now, right, than it used to be. and whereas before I was in Skyrim and I could go wherever I want, now I am in Pirates of the Caribbean and the ride goes on this little rail, and yes, that's the way it is. That's what lives feel like. So I don't want to make anyone feel bad. Again, I'm being very contrarian to what the philosophy is here, but realize this: authenticity and fun are not mutually exclusive. You can think they are, and if you do, then you'll be forced to choose one or the other, and most of the times you'll pick fun, because again, we're eating Cheetos around the table. It's not the end of the world. But realize that there is a certain kind of fun, that comes from authenticity, right? It's not the ha 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 ha, what a fun I'm having, this is so funny, I should put it in YouTube. It's a different kind of fun. It's the kind of fun that you have when you are a tourist in a foreign country and you are watching with your own eyes how different sentient beings carry on their lives, and it's completely different what you imagine, and you are learning something from it. That's a different kind of fun. You are taking things maybe a little too seriously for a game, but if you have experienced it, then it's like nothing else that compares. It's much better than the fun that you get from watching a movie or from reading a book, right? Those are prepackaged stories that someone felt very strongly about, and they are being transmitted to you, and you're getting some of those feelings. This is different. This is you watching something happen in front of your eyes. If you are a writer, and many of us in the hobby are, at least amateurs maybe, sometimes you may have felt, or no, this has happened to you for sure. If you have a beloved character, for sure it has happened to you. You start to feel that the character is making decisions somehow independently of you, right? And like you as a player on the table know that he is about to go do something that's terrible, but he has to do it, and you couldn't stop him if you wanted to, and if you did stop him, it would feel like a lie, so you let him go. That is what I refer to as seeing, right? And we'll get to it in a second, but first we have to realize, right, if authenticity produces a deeper and more meaningful kind of fun, then there is a series of questions that you had to backtrack and just realize if there is the right paradigm. For instance, right, if fudging dice and railroading are poison to the story's authenticity, then how am I supposed to stay in control? Those are tools of control. But if I cannot stay in control, then how can I be responsible for the story? And if I'm not responsible for the story, then who is? Right? So that was the preamble, and it's 8:41 now. So, sorry about that. But so I think it was necessary that we explore where I'm coming from, right? Fundamentally, what I believe the difference between a game master and a story host: the game master owns the story, is responsible for it, needs to control it. The story host doesn't, right? The story host is different, and here's the thing I want to say about the story host: is very different from the game master, because if you could write on the game screen in front of you the letters "It's not about you," that would be the best advice that I could get a story host. In traditional tabletop gaming, the GM is the proactive force, and the player characters react to that, right? So it's throw, catch. In the seeing philosophy, and that's seeing with capital S with your eyes, these roles are reversed, right? The story host is reacting to the player's initiatives, and the player's initiatives are the ones who carry the burden. They're the ones who are actually leading the story and taking it where they want it to go. And the story host is just saying, well, if you do that, therefore the world does this. And there is no judgment in that statement. Therefore you deserve it. No. Therefore I should give you. There is no I. Therefore it would be more fun if this happened. It's not about the fun, right? That's so. What I wrote here, a story. If you want to try it one day, if you want to try it with a story host, your job is not to give anyone a challenge. Your job is not to entertain. Your job is not to seek a balanced ratio of wins and losses. Your job is not to judge who is and isn't deserving. Your job is not to teach anyone lessons. Your job is not even to make a good story. All the stories that are actually good, they make themselves, despite you, right? So your job is to see how the world reacts to the things the characters are doing, and that's it. and that's it. And that's very different, because that means that you can root for your friends now, right? Before, if you are the game master and you have favorites, that's horrible, right? You're being unfair, because it's your job to judge. If it's not your job to judge, then you can root for everyone anyway, because you're impartial anyway, because you're in a way powerless, and that frees you from the responsibility of what things happen, right? If you are a story host and a player gets himself killed, it's his fault, it's not yours, right? And you can feel bad for him, you can mourn with him if you, oh my god, I'm so sorry, man, you got your character killed, I wish I could have done something about it. But unfortunately, I can do nothing about it, because it's not my story, it's not even my world, it's a real place, as real as it can be, right? And if you want to go for a mind trip later on, try look up this famous phrase, cogito ergo sum. I'm sure I butchered the Latin. It means I think, therefore I am. Think about it for a second. So apparently Descartes, this French philosopher, philosophers do these kind of things from time to time. He wanted to assure himself that he was actually real, that he was not somebody's dream, that he was not in a simulation, that he was not an illusion. Like, how do I know I am? How do you know He said, well, I think. I can think, I'm sentient on my own, therefore I am. Keep that in mind. Remember what I said 5 minutes ago about your favorite player, about your favorite character, who sometimes makes decisions for himself without you? He thinks. I'll leave it there. So, anyway, for story host to work, the burden needs to be on the players. And if the burden needs to be on the players, they need to know about it. If they don't know about it, then story hosting will not work, right? Especially if you have experienced veteran players who come from win-lose sort of systems or antagonistic systems. They will try to go to a tavern, and they will sit in the tavern waiting for the quest giver. And the quest giver will never arrive, because it's usually handled by you, the story host, and you're the story host not handling anything. So if they are waiting on you and you are waiting on them, is a very bad thing, right? So don't let that happen. Tell your players a very simple message, something like, guys, I don't have a plot for you. There's no railroad. There's not even a train. All there is you. You have to figure out what you want, then go for it. All I will ever do is tell you how the world reacts to whatever you try. I'm rooting for you. I know you'll make me proud, but you need to take the initiative, right? So how do we ensure that players take the initiative? The answer is this: prevent toons. Toons, T-O-O-N-S. That's a derogative term for a character that is not really a person, is more like a combination of stats, right? So a toon is someone who has strength of 18 and intelligence of 15, and you ask him, but who is he? And he goes, well, he has strength of 18, and right, there is no personality, there is no life behind, there is no story. He just appeared out of nowhere magically in the tavern waiting for the quest giver, and he doesn't even have a home. He'll go around murdering people, which is why they earn the lovable term murder hobos, right? Those toons are poison to your story, because they are lies to begin with, right? You cannot wait for the nothing to consume them. They are the nothing. So if you can avoid toons from happening, then if you have real characters, so what is a real character? Is someone who has a vector, right? So if you remember physics, vector is velocity plus direction, right? So a direction means more than one single point, right? It came from somewhere, is going to somewhere at a certain speed. And all that we are doing as players is just showing up in the middle and start following him. It's like following an arrow. You don't catch the arrow, you follow the arrow to where it wants to go. And there are ways to prevent that. The book recommends a few. There is a 3 questions method, in which you can sort of make sure that your character has a direction and somewhere to go. But the idea is, if all the characters are well fleshed and are well designed, pretty much the moment you say go, it's like at the horse races, right? When you open the little doors and the horse just jump out because they already want to go. That's what a good character will do. They will not wait for you. They will not wait for a quest giver. And then all you have to do, and this will be the ending of my little spiel, all you have to do is say yes to them a lot. Right? Don't say no. So remember, you're not the antagonist, and if they win all the time, has nothing to do with you. And if they lose all the time, that has nothing to do with you. You're not there to punish. You're not teaching a lesson. You're not, playing favorites. You're simply letting them. You're reacting to what they are doing. So say yes a lot. And when you say yes a lot, then comes to the single best advice that I can give any story host. And with this, I will end the talk. Single best advice: look for snowballs. So what is a snowball? It's a decision made by a player that has consequences, that has more consequences and more consequences, until the entire story can be traced directly to a decision the player made. That's a snowball. And that's the best thing ever, because it means that the player is now invested into the story that he himself made. Technically the character made it, right? And the only way to get a snowball is by saying yes. So if your character wants to try something crazy that goes against your plans, first of all, don't have plans. Second of all, go with it. Just roll whatever they want to do. Go. They want to hijack an airplane, and that's a horrible example. Go with it, right? And what are really the consequences of that? Well, they're terrorists now, and it's going to be very interesting how the NSA is going to look for them, and so on and so forth. And then the consequences keep rolling, keep rolling. So one of the things I did with this book is I asked everyone to email me sort of details from their sessions and how the sessions go, because I love reading them and I just love seeing what they are. And there was one session in Germany. For some reason, this game is very popular in Germany. I have no idea why. Some group in Germany, within 6 or so sessions, reached thermonuclear war. And they're playing in Mad Max now, basically. It's Enter the Shadowside, but it's Mad Max also, because they blew up the world. And he let it happen, and that's fine. That's what he was supposed to do. So it's a snowball. And it's seen, and it's the difference between a story host and a GM. So thank you so much. That's my spiel. So we have 9 minutes left. I don't think we'll use all of them unless there are a ton of questions, but I'm here if you need me. Does anyone have any questions at all? Yeah. Drive-through RPG. Drive-through RPG, that's the monopoly for all things RPG books. So yeah, Enter the Shadowside, little commercial. If you type Google, it'll send you to Kickstarter. Kickstarter will send you to Drive-through RPG, and yeah, I'll be very happy if you buy it. And I'll be even happier if you please email me those sessions, even if they end in thermonuclear warfare. Actually, especially if they do. So, all right. I couldn't hear you. Can you? Oh my God! I'm so sorry. Can you repeat it? Well, you deserve a good night's rest, sir. Good. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, everyone. Have fun at AndoCon. I'll be there next year in person, so we don't have to do this weird Skype thing. And thank you. So, look at, beautiful. This makes my day. Hey, can you do something for me? Can you show it again? I'm gonna take a screenshot and put it in Facebook. Yes. Oh, this is beautiful. I'm gonna get at least 20 likes. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Nice. No, that's good. 20 likes is enough for one night. I'll be there in person next year. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Appreciate it. Bye bye.